I was driving back from a party, fairly late one evening, when, wouldn't you know it, the route I always take was closed as a tree had fallen and blocked the road. To be honest, it wasn't all that surprising. There had been a huge storm the night prior, and my buddies and I had urged me to bunk up and stay with them. But I just couldn't do that. I had 2 cats at home who would be really sore with me in the morning if they did not get their breakfast. These cats of mine are crazy, and they would tear up the entire house. If you own any cats or know anybody that owns cats, I'm sure you can relate. I was heading back from the rain, and now I would have to go the longer route, ironically through the thicker woods, where likely more debris had already fallen onto the road. Unfortunately, where I live, there's not that many convenient routes back to my house. I almost never went that way, just because of the constant debris and bumps in the road pay havoc on my suspension. But now, I was left with no choice. I made sure I was driving pretty slowly, and it was already super dark, just from being late, and not even more from the storm. The rain was pelting down pretty hard, making visibility crappy, when I saw this thing run out onto the road. I slammed on my brakes, just from reflex, and ended up skidding to a halt, just in front of it, even though despite my careful speed. Now, I need to point out that I live in Washington State. You stop off for gas along any of the major routes, and you'll find tacky souvenirs for the so-called cryptids that live in this state. Bigfoot, especially, is huge in Oregon and Washington. Despite growing up hearing all about them, and everybody somehow knowing somebody who knew somebody who'd seen one, I thought it was just all a pile of BS, made up by tourism, or people keeping those stories alive. Yet, there was absolutely no denying what was standing in the road, staring me down as I approached in my old beater. It was huge. I'd guess around maybe 8 foot at least, and completely solid looking. It didn't seem to be at all dazzled by my full beam headlights, or the car that had managed to stop just a short few feet away from it. It was covered from head to toe in dark matted fur, from what I could tell, except for the face, which had a sort of grayish hue and a very leathery-like skin. To be honest, the thing I would say it mostly resembled was King Kong, but looked more humanoid. It was basically like a mixture of King Kong and an image you get in your mind of a Stone Age man. Neanderthals, I think they're called. Does that make sense? It just stood there, regardless of the pouring rain and me in my car. It didn't appear concerned. Then, it just sort of tumbled off into the trees on the other side of the road. As it passed my car, I will admit, I looked out my window to try and catch a glimpse of its feet. It was just too dark. Judging by the height of it, though, I would definitely suggest they were rather large. After a few moments of catching myself, I carried on. I wasn't exactly scared, as it hadn't appeared aggressive, just as if it was going for a stroll, and we just happened to cross paths. And guess what? Now I'm one of those same people as the others that can say they know somebody who had a Bigfoot encounter. I'm a believer now. My grandfather was a lumberjack when he was in his younger days, and he had a story he would tell us over and over of this creature that used to taunt him in the woods. He would be working away, and suddenly, he'd get a branch or a stone thrown at him, often pretty accurately. He would look up from whatever he was doing, and there would be a little creature, sitting up perched high in the trees, staring down at him. He told us they're called argopelters. It had a long, thin body, with a face kind of like a monkey. Long, slender, thin legs that were able to wrap around tree branches high up. Long, but strong, solid arms that could pick up and throw stuff, almost as heavy as it was. It would screech, kind of like a monkey, but sounding much more different. but they never thought it was a monkey or anything like that. Once, the Argo Pelters saw Granddad, or one of the other lumberjacks. It would not stop throwing stuff at them until they moved on. He told us that it never came down from the trees to try and attack them. It was more like it just didn't want them around. Then one day, they worked out why. Grandfather was quietly sat under a tree, taking a break. This time, he wasn't making any noise, just resting and enjoying a break and a coffee. He saw a woodpecker fly over, and was just admiring the beautiful sight, when the agropelter shot out one of its long arms, grabbed the bird, breaking its neck instantly, and carrying it off in its mouth. They understood. By making all the noise, they were scaring away its food. After that day, Granddad said when he was working on a long job, he would bring a dead pigeon with him and leave it as an offering. He wouldn't see the creature, but the pigeon would always be gone from the place he'd left it. On days when he forgot or could not bring one, the pelting with branches and stones would always occur. We loved this story as kids, but I have no idea if he was just making it up, or if such thing really did exist in the Washington forests. I've told this story to other friends who are more knowledgeable, and they suggest it could have very well been a juvenile Bigfoot. What's your take on it? I'm an officer, and a few years ago, I got called to a report of a possible drowning. An anonymous call came in to say they'd been driving past one of the lakes and seen something floating in the water. The report had said it wasn't moving, so they assumed it was a body, rather than somebody needing help. That was all the info we were given. This particular lake is pretty big, and I was on my own and nearing the end of my shift. Chances were that whatever or whoever was out there was washed away by now, but I knew I had to go check. Primarily because the school bus also passes by every morning, and there was no way I wanted to be responsible for a body washing up on the shore and scaring kids. I headed down there, driving slowly past with my cruiser lights on, seeing if I could spot anything floating in the water. It wasn't dark, but it would be soon, and the light from the daytime was fading rapidly. I was about to give up when something out there caught my eye. Since I didn't exactly have a boat, I could not get in the water to go and check, but I did have a powerful on-sight at the end of my rifle that would allow me to see better. So I got out of the cruiser and used the gun as a telescope. When the shape I'd seen came back into view, I almost dropped my scope. There was something out there, but unless I was going mad, it was not a drowned person. To start with, all I saw was long and thick snake-like body, like you can imagine one of those giant anaconda bodies would be. It seemed to be coming in and out of the water. I almost did not want to look again, but I had to. I put the sight back up to my eye and honed in on that one spot. This time, I caught a better look at the snake-like body, but also saw the head. You might think this sounds crazy, but then again, people write in to tell you this kind of stuff all the time. I thought I must be crazy, and there was no way I was ever going to report it in. But I swear to you, this is what I saw. This snake-like body had a horse's head on it. Even writing this to you, I find myself questioning my memory. But that is what was out there. Some sort of lake giant snake serpent with a horse-like head. Not that the head was an actual horse's head, but the shape was nearly resembling that. I stood watching it swim for about 10 more minutes before it finally disappearing. I radioed back to dispatch that I had combed through the area, but there was no body visible. I have passed by that same lake many times, and since now, I always look out for such a thing. On patrols, even on days off, but I've never seen such a thing again. This was in central Washington state. I live near Mount St. Helens in Washington. A couple of weeks ago, I went to go see a sick friend. And no, she did not have COVID. She hadn't been to school for a few days, so I was heading over to drop off some work. When she answered the door, I was shocked at the sight of her. She looked like she had not showered or eaten in days. I asked what was up, what sort of sickness she had, and she just cried. She said she wasn't really sick, but had been so frightened by something that she could not eat or sleep. She'd been driving back from her boyfriend's house just a few nights prior when her cell phone started ringing. Thinking it might be her mom calling to get her to pick her up, she pulled over and answered. Just as she hung up and was about to start to drive again, there was a huge bang on the roof of the car. Something really heavy was up there. She said that she was too scared to just drive off and hope whatever it was fell. So she just sat there frozen in fear. It then jumped off the roof and onto the hood, staring in at her through the windshield. She said it looked like a person-sized blue monkey bat, in her words. Although it was crouched on the hood, she could see it was around her size and height and weight, covered in a strange dark bluish fur, and had a monkey-like face with bright yellow eyes and scary sharp teeth. Again, these are her words. As she just stared at it, in total and utter paralyzing fear, it stood up, spread these giant, thick, black, leathery-like bat wings, and then lifted off the car, so she could see if it had huge clawed toes on its feet, resembling talons. It appeared to hover in the air for a few moments, maintaining full eye contact. She said it was like a staring contest. She wanted to look away, but felt she couldn't. Then it flew off. She stayed there for a bit, crying, trying to calm down. I must have looked a bit incredulous as she then grabbed my hand and took me out to the garage where her car was parked. There on the hood were tons of scratches. They looked like they'd been made by something with really sharp claws, or like a giant eagle had landed on her roof and tore it up. It still creeped me out.